These brooders are amazing. I couldn't be happier with this company.
We absolutely love these cages.
One at a time, okay, guys? Hey guys, welcome to another Coturnix Corner Live. Glad you guys could join us. I hope everyone's doing great and having a wonderful week so far. We have a really interesting live for you guys tonight. Joining us will be Jeff Mattocks and Rebecca Lynch, and we're going to be talking all about quail nutrition. But first, as always, I got a couple announcements to run through, and then we'll get started on this. Big shout out to our sponsors, as always, Southwest Game Birds and Hatching Time. Both these companies do amazing things for the channel as far as, you know, donating prizes to give away to you guys. Southwest Game Birds always donating hatching eggs. Hatching Time gives away a $50 gift certificate every week. So patronize their channel if you guys don't mind. Also, we've got a new live stream that we do on Sunday mornings. It's called Morning Musings. Coffee and Quail with Terry. We didn't do one this past Sunday because I had some stuff I had to work with on my bees, so I couldn't get to it. But this Sunday we will be doing it. It's going to be at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and hopefully we can do it every Monday. And there's no real topic on that. It's just, you know, we sit down, have our coffee, and enjoy. Hold on a second, I messed up something here. What did I do? Hold on. Are you hearing that, Rebecca? That music?
I can hear you.
All right, I have a... Hold on, guys. 1 second. Okay, I think I got it. I hit the wrong button. All right, where was I? Let me get back to my screen here. Also join us next week. We have Jennifer Bryant going to be coming on the show. She's from Bryant's Roost, and she has done a incubator comparison project that she's working on, and she is going to announce, you know, her findings with that. So make sure you join us next week for that. And also the Coturnix Kids program, which is going on over on the CoturnixCorner.com website. We've got all our sponsors set up for this year. We have Homestead Harvest, who is donating feed. We've got Hatching Time, which is donating a 2-unit cage setup. Thieving Otter Farm is donating some hatching eggs. Bryant's Roost is donating an incubator. And then Coturnix Corner, we got the tumbler, and then the community is donating a $25 Hatching Time gift certificate for the kids. And we do this once a month. Basically, if you head on over to CoturnixCorner.com, there's a link at the top of the main page in the nav bar that says Coturnix Kids Project. Just check that out. It's got all the rules and whatnot. But get your kids involved, guys. We got a lot of great prizes for them. We got a lot of great stories or programs or projects already entered, and it's growing really fast. So get your kids entered in that. Also tonight, guys, if you have questions for our guest, please post them in the chat room. We're trying to keep this topic related, so I'm not going to turn down any questions, but try to keep it topic related, and we'll get to your questions after they're done with the presentation. So I think that's about it. Let me go ahead and bring in our guest. Welcome to the show, Jeff Mattocks and Rebecca Lynch. Hello, guys. How are you?
I wanted to say also tonight I'd like to do a giveaway. So
okay.
We can pick a winner and do some Thieving Otter Farm eggs for a giveaway.
Okay. I did mean to say that too in the announcements. The reason we haven't been doing giveaways, guys, is because of the temperature. It's extremely hot out there, and we just don't want to ship when it's really hot and you guys have issues with your hatch. So, but if Rebecca feels that she can get eggs out safely, we'll let her go ahead and do that. We also have a $50 hatching time gift certificate going out tonight too. So, and I am going to actually, Rebecca, I'm going to let you pick the 2 winners for tonight.
Okay.
Pick a couple questions that you really liked and give them a prize. So,
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away, and let me know when you want to go into the chat room and take the questions.
Okay, well, I'm Rebecca. I am owner of Thieving Otter Farm, and I invited my good friend Jeff Mattocks to join us tonight. Jeff is a poultry nutritionist. So, Jeff, we kind of wanted to talk about quail feed and get your take on it. I know that there's a lot of different views on quail feed. So I want to talk to you about first, like reading labels for chicks, and what is good and what is bad. What should we be looking in a label? As far as nutrition requirements or fillers or anything like that. So, Terry, can you go ahead and share the screen for us? There we go. So this is kind of a typical game bird starter feed. And Jeff, I just kind of wanted your opinion on this here. And then I also have one of your labels that we can show to compare to here in a second.
So, like you said earlier, there's a lot of different thoughts on quail feed. So, when I started doing this in 1996, not to date myself, but anyway, my mentor gave me quail feed starting at 26%, and I see 26, I see 20. I've seen a few at 24, but I see 26s, 28s, 30s. I've even seen people trying to start quail on 32%, right? And everybody's grasping at that number, but so everybody kind of gets hung up on the protein number, and as a nutritionist, I don't even look at the protein number. I'm dropping down and I'm starting to look at those amino acids, right? So that's why I wore my amino acid t-shirt. So, even on this, and look, the Purina Startina is probably one of the better ones on the market. I hate to even say that out loud, but when I go back through and I research the data for starting quail, I want a lysine number at 1.7, right? Not 1.5. And I want a methionine at 0.65 to 0.7. So these things all add cost. Actually, my books show that you want crude fat at above 7%. Okay, again, adds cost. Okay, fiber's good anywhere between 5 and 6. And this is a maximum number, so I'm sure that they are not above 6. They're giving themselves a little bit of room in there. Calcium levels, these are pretty good, but generally, because any of the game fowl, whether you're talking quail, pheasants, turkeys, whatever, they're a touch more prone to rickets. So this is where actually I'd like to see calcium levels, the bottom number being 1.5, the top number being 2%. That early bone development is really important. The phosphorus level's okay at 0.8. Again, my personal preference is I would be running at 0.9 to 1%. Again, bone development, early developmental stages, just to avoid that rickets. The salt here,
Jeff?
in my opinion, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you tell us a little bit more about rickets and what that is?
Okay, so rickets is vitamin D calcium deficiency. Okay, Now, in this feed, we know that there's vitamin D added, but we have no idea how much vitamin D is added. Okay, and so, but in these early phases, having extra vitamin D, having extra calcium, gives you a little bit of an insurance, that the birds are not. So, vitamin D is responsible for facilitating calcium absorption in the body. Okay, so without vitamin D, the calcium doesn't get utilized correctly. Those two are tied together, very synergistic. And getting the calcium absorbed in those first, in a quail's life, it's actually in the first 7 days, because it develops so much quicker than any other fowl that we know of, that we're raising anyway. So we want to make sure that we're getting, we're getting that vitamin D, we're getting that calcium. Again, they're using calcium carbonate. It's not a high grade calcium, but so people need to understand. See, I can look at this tag and I'm going down through plant protein products. Well, that's a generic term. So today they could be using soybean meal. Tomorrow they could be using canola meal. The next day they could be using corn gluten meal. So they're constantly buying and figuring out the best buy for protein that they can get. So they're going to be shopping around, right? And these formulas could change on a daily basis. And I'm sure on their larger feeds, like their general 16 or 17% layer mashes that they make, those formulas are changing on a daily basis because of the amount of tons that they're actually manufacturing each day. They're playing the commodities market. It's almost like us when gas prices get crazy. Somebody says, oh, if you drive across town, you can get gas for 20 cents a gallon less, right? Same thing's happening here. Okay. It's happening at a much larger scale. Sometimes it's based on availability. Most of the time it's based on price. So they're shopping. So they're allowed to use these generic terms, plant protein products. Could be any of the plant-based proteins out there. They can pick and choose what they're using, any combinations. Grain products, right? Well, that could be corn, that could be wheat, that could be barley, that could be triticale, it could be a whole bunch of different grains in that category, again, based on which one has the most favorable price, or what were they able to buy. Then we're dropping down
Jeff,
to
can I introduce or
Yeah, sure.
can I interrupt you again?
Sure.
Is there any detriment to the bird to have its diet changed back and forth all the time like this?
Yes and no. Okay, so it depends on what they put in there. So earlier this year, for instance, barley would have got harvested across the U.S. Okay, so folks like Purina, Cargill, everybody else, they know this. They take advantage of the farmer and they buy it as cheaply as they can. Well, brand new harvested small grains like barley, oats, wheat, etc., need a period to rest. Okay, so before they're actually good for feeding. But Purina's going to run them into their mix anyway. So if you all of a sudden changed, let's say you get a new lot number of feed from Tractor Supply or wherever you choose to buy your feed. I'm not picking on anybody tonight this way. And all of a sudden you notice that your chicks or even your other fowl, the manure seems to be a little bit more sticky. It sticks to them. It doesn't form right, etc. Barley, wheat, oats, all of the small grains will tend to make a stickier manure, okay, that will stick to the bird. Though otherwise seem perfectly healthy, right? You're not really going to notice anything else. They're not absorbing all the carbohydrates or all the starches correctly, right? So when they pass through, those excess carbohydrates or starches allows that manure to be stickier, not as well formed, so you're not going to get the nicely formed poop piles that you're used to seeing. And so birds aren't going to die. You might notice a slight slowdown in growth. What happens when they do change, let's say they change protein or any of these products, is the digestive tract has to adapt to the change. Okay, just like us as humans. Okay, so your diet is very stable. You typically eat randomly within a certain guideline of food, right? Meat, potatoes, vegetables, etc. Well, all of a sudden, let's say we started feeding you sushi every day. Well, how's your body going to react to that, for instance, right? Or so if you have a major diet change, you notice it in your metabolism. Our birds are no different than that. So if there's a big enough change, you will see there's a disruption in how fast they grow, how well they lay eggs, how well they hatch, all of that. It's trickle down. So it takes probably about a week for a quail's digestive tract to realign to the changes in the feeds. Even if you changed from Purina Startina to another brand, you never want to go 100% change. Okay. So, when you're down to your last bag, you want to be mixing 50-50 for a week to 10 days before you make the complete change. I see a lot of people, they run out of feed, they go down to the store, and they don't have my brand today, so they get something else. Really not a great idea. So you have no idea if the formulas are the same. Chances are that they're not. So,
Okay.
um,
You know,
yeah.
do you have more? I don't want to move on to the
No,
next topic
no,
unless you've
no, no,
unless
no,
you
no,
have.
no, 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 no. So, they're running the sodium or the salt levels just a touch higher. They're not horrible. They're just a little bit on the high side, but there's some recent data that I read over the last few months, last 6 months to a year, feeding slightly higher salt or sodium levels in the early stages, like in the first few days to a week, encourages additional water consumption. So the more water they consume, the more feed they eat, the faster they grow. Okay. So one of the cheap ways of doing it is to force salt to them. Doing this for an extended period of time, just like us, you're starting to work the kidneys a little harder than you need to, so you're offsetting some of the metabolism or some of the body functions the way they would work naturally, so to speak. So,
Oh wow.
yeah. I mean,
I've
these
got
aren't
a
horrible, so don't get, but yeah.
and get these lined up here. So this is what you provided. Can you tell
Right.
us a little bit about this mix?
So this is one that I made. I'm not a fan of solvent extracted soybean meal, so you rarely, unless you twist my arm and threaten to kill me or something like that, I'm never going to put it in a feed because it literally, and it's not in here. So solvent extracted is just what it says. They use a commercial degreaser called hexane. They mix it with the soybean when it's ground. This releases the oils from the soybean, and that's how they get the oil out of commercial soybean meal. This is all pressed and or heat treated. That's what the expeller meal is. The roasted soybean is the entire soybean. They cook it, they toast it, and then we cook it, or then we grind it and add it to feed. Got a little bit of corn, got a little bit of wheat. I do like some diversity in my starches. The other thing I've found is game birds like quail, turkeys, pheasants actually perform better with some wheat in their diet than just using all corn. It's more of a natural, I think it's the enzymes that are contained within the wheat, some of the xylanase, that really helps balance out the digestive tract for the bird, and they perform a whole lot better. Since we don't really have access to insect meals, I'm using a fish meal in there to get a meat type protein. If you're going to use fish meal, you want to use a high grade fish meal. You don't want to use a byproduct fish meal, so that you're getting a better amino acid profile. Of course, the Poultry NutriBalancer is our product. It's in there for the vitamins and the minerals. I like to have a little bit of oats in there to keep the fiber level good. And also the alfalfa meal, but I'm getting color out of the alfalfa meal. So I'm getting, a lot of the carotenoids, from the alfalfa meal. I'm getting two things. I'm getting beneficial fiber to keep the digestive tract clean and moving, but I'm also getting coloration. So I find that I get better pigmentation to feathers, legs, eyes, beak, and I also get better pigmentation to eggshells. Also, a lot of those carotenoids will transfer into the yolk. So if you ever want to run your own little experiment on it, and it's nice with quail because you can see this quickly, feed some of your quail some alfalfa meal to versus birds that did not, same age, same group, and then crack them and compare the yolk color, right? You're going to be looking at yellow to orange on your ones without. You're going to be looking at extremely vibrant, bright orange to the ones being fed the alfalfa meal. So that is a vitamin A form that's getting transferred into the yolk that then is going to get transferred into the chick and give you more chick vigor. Did I say
that's
too much all at
fascinating.
one time? Okay. Sorry, I said a lot there in one breath. So, if you need me
No,
to,
it was
okay.
really
All right.
cool.
Turkey booster is something that we came up with specifically for game type birds. It adds that extra phosphorus that I was talking about. It also bumps up the vitamins to the higher level, like I was talking about, to avoid rickets, and also gives me stronger chick vigor, once they hatch. Aragonite is Bahama sand. So anybody who's ever been to the Bahamas seen those really nice white sandy beaches. Our Gulf Stream, as it goes around the point of Florida, will drop off little pieces of seashell and coral, right? So the fancy word here is it precipitates out of the Gulf Stream and it leaves it behind. So there's only a couple companies that they're actually pulling this product, which is actually, it is truly beneficial to the environment down there, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to get boat passage and things like that. So, but they're pulling this, they dry it. We've been bringing it in now for over 30 years. It's an outstanding source of calcium because, like oyster shell, it's already gone through the digestive tract of a living creature. So it breaks down more easily when it goes into a digestive tract of any animal. So that's an explanation of the ingredients that I use. If you want to scroll down to, these are nutrient calculations now. But, we're looking at, I did do a 30% protein because that's what everybody was asking for. Not because that's what I believe in, but that's what everybody was asking for. So you got the 30% protein. Notice the fat level on mine is at 8.49, almost 8.5. Remember what the Purina was at 2.5? Okay.
Right.
Those birds need a higher fat. Okay. I'm a little low on fiber, but I couldn't get all my numbers to work. So I was happy at 4.6, almost 4.7. Then you drop down, I got the 1.48 calcium, but remember I talked about how good aragonite was compared to ground limestone. So I'm comfortable that the bird is getting the calcium that they need from the source that we're using. Phosphorus level was 0.8 on the Purina, and I'm running at 1.13 because I don't want to take a gamble on rickets anytime. My salt level is at 0.33 because I'm targeting a 0.19 for my sodium levels. Now, I'm not running as high, on the sodium levels. I'm a little bit up. Anything above 0.17 is good. I ran at 0.19. People are, let me pause for a second, because not pause, but let's stop here for a second, only because people are saying, what's the difference between 0.17 and 0.19, right? In our world, 0.02% is nothing, right? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of poultry, it's huge. I mean, that is a big number, especially when we get down to like the amino acids, and we can go down to the amino acids. Remember, the lysine was 1.5 over on the Purina. I'm at 1.88. Methionine was 0.5, and I'm at 0.65, right? So the amino acids are way more important to me. And if you want me to stand up and model my shirt again, I'll be happy to do that. But those amino acids are actually more important than protein. But it's very difficult to explain this to people. And we've been trained to think
So
protein,
Jeff,
protein. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Jeff, if you go to, I know like the local feed stores and stuff will sometimes have their own mix, and sometimes they don't include lysine and methionine on the label. That's something that people should really be looking at, and maybe not purchasing that food if that isn't provided. Correct?
You are right. So everything that was on the Purina label that we saw earlier is required. Now, everything that's on what you see here are my nutrient calculations for when this is what I print out when I do a ration for somebody. So not all of this is required, but you got to have protein, you got to have lysine, you got to have methionine, you got to have your calcium, your minimum maximums, your salt minimum maximums. Those are required by law. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean everybody does it. So I've looked at so many tags in the last few years since I've been working with breeders, for other poultry and quail and whatever. I just pull my hair out at how poorly labeled, so many chicken feeds across the U.S. are. When you get outside the U.S., the labeling requirements are completely different. But here, these are the bare minimums. And, the state requires these, the federal government requires these. They have an oversight organization called AFCO that tells you what you have to label. But I run into a lot of smaller feed mills, the older mom and pops, and they just put the basics on there, protein, fat, and fiber. And you're lucky sometimes to get a little bit of calcium labeled, but it's not, and they're not up to date. And the state doesn't have enough people to enforce it and to go around and check it. And so it is what it is. But look, if a feed mill doesn't know enough to have the right label, right? Or do they know enough to have the right feed formula to make it right? So that's what you have to ask yourself, right? So if it's not on the label, is it in the bag, right? And most of the time you can read the ingredients and kind of see if it's in there or not, whether the lysine's been added, the methionine's been added. You can't see, you need to read down through. You're looking for probiotics and things like that to be added. To me, they're very important, right? The cheaper the feed, the less ingredient the list is going to be. Look, and for the folks that are listening, you know what? If you want to email me a copy of a tag, I will give you my God's honest opinion of what you sent me. Now, if you're sensitive, don't send me a tag, okay? Do not. Rebecca's already learned this, okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it for anybody. I'm going to tell you bluntly exactly what I saw and my opinion. Now, if you don't like that, don't send it to me, okay? So, but I'm happy to try and help people, find a better feed, understand their feed, okay? And I can't be on the phone for hours talking to you about it, but I will review it and I'll tell you what I see. I'll answer a few questions. And if you tell me where you're at, I'll tell you if there's an option for better feed, things like that. So anyway.
What would be the best way for people to reach you if they wanted to do that?
I'd like for them to send it to the team. There's 3 nutritionists here at Fertrell. There's myself, Rachel Teller, and Baylor Lansden. And if you send it to livestock@fertrell.com, it will come to all 3 of us. So the first one who's available will, try to help you out the best they can. Okay. So.
Okay. I've added that to our chat here so people can have that.
Well,
That's really awesome.
Okay. To review a tag and answer a couple questions, we're not going to charge you. There's not a consulting fee. Now, if you get on the phone with one of my nutritionists for an hour and don't buy anything, I might have to send you a bill. Okay. But if you keep it simple,
Fair
right?
enough.
If you keep it simple and you don't abuse it, then, you know, we're trying to help people be better at what they're doing. So, but yeah, we have to be realistic as well.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, one of the big topics that has been talked about a lot in the quail world recently has been the grinding of feed for chicks. So the way that I have approached it is take a look at your feed, and because not all feed is the same. Some pieces are a lot bigger, some pieces are smaller. And one of our viewers had sent a picture of a grain mill that they use to make their feed a little smaller. And this is an example. It's not dust. It's just making a little bit easier for the chicks to eat. So my question is a two-part question: is this needed? And is there any detriment to grinding feed? Is there any danger to the chicks of eating feed that has been ground?
That's the easy part. So the nutritional value of what's in the hand and what's not is exactly the same. So you didn't lose anything. So I would tell you don't grind it like 2 months in advance, but if you want to grind enough for 3 or 4 days, that's fine. Because when you open that larger kernel up, like he's holding in his hand, that larger kind of pellet, so to speak,
Hmm.
you're allowing air into the inside ingredients. Okay. So that enables it to oxidize just like stale bread. Okay. And everybody knows what stale bread is, right? It's been on the counter for 2 weeks and that sort of thing. So you don't want your carbohydrates, fats, and starches to be in contact with air for an extended period of time. Right. So they're going to oxidize off. It does slow down the absorption rate and how well the bird's going to be able to digest it. So I would say if you want to do a week's worth, fine. Right. Just don't get carried away. If they were my birds and I knew I had a brand new hatch coming out today, then I probably would do the grind today. Right. Just so it has a much better smell. So it's all about the smell, folks, right? So those chicks are going to find food, believe it or not, based on smell. Okay. It's not about what it looks like. It's a little bit about what it looks like, but it's more about the smell. So we want to try and make it convenient. We want it to smell as fresh as possible. I'm huge on feed freshness, and Rebecca already knows this, right? So you need to read labels. You need to see what the manufacturing date is. You want to try and keep it as fresh as possible, especially for your youngest birds. Once they're adults, I don't freak out as much about it. But you know, look, people, how many people have children out there, and how many people would have fed their child something that's 2, 3, 4 weeks or a month old, been in the fridge for a month, right? It's not going to happen. So why are we trying to do this with our immature, or new hatch chicks? The fresher you can get it, the happier you're going to be. The faster they're going to grow, the healthier they're going to be. That's the bottom line. But there's no sorry, I didn't mean to go down that
So that
rabbit
being
trail.
said,
But
we probably don't want to stock up on bags and bags of feed for.
no. And when you go to the feed store, you need to look at the labels. You need to figure out the code for when it was manufactured, and try and and look, you need to have the conversation with your Tractor Supply person. You need to find somebody in there, take them a dozen eggs or do something really nice for them so they remember you. Then you say, look, I need the freshest feed possible, right? So maybe they'll go to the back room for you and pull some out, that hasn't even gone to the shelf yet. Something like that. Okay. It helps to have friends at the feed store. Okay. Figure out what they like, do something nice for them, talk to them nice. What you say about them when you get to the parking lot is completely up to you. But when you're in the store, hey, let me back up for a second, because I grew up in a feed mill. Okay. At the age of 8, I was pushing a broom and carrying out bags of feed for little old ladies every Saturday morning from 7 to noon. Every Saturday. Okay. So I've been there. I've done that. I started at the age of 8. So I've done grinding. I've done mixing. I've done, I've bagged a lot of feed. I've made a lot of deliveries. So I ain't making this up. And so it helps to be nice to the person at the feed store. Try and treat them like a human being or a little bit better, and it'll be rewarding for you. But look, anyway, feed freshness. Feed freshness is very, very important, people. So don't feed old feed. It's just not, you're going to see the difference. I mean, you're going to see the difference in performance.
Okay. There's a couple of, I know that we're going to take questions at the end, but I do see a couple of questions about grinding feed.
Okay.
If it's ground too much into, say, like a powder, would that be detrimental to the chick at all?
It's not detrimental. It's just not appealing, right? It has no eye appeal. Yeah. So kind of like us, right? You sit down to a meal and the better it looks on the plate, the more anxious you are to eat it. Well, the birds aren't any different, right? So you want it to look good. You want it to be, so to me, the right side of this, after it's been, for the chicks, after it's been ground down a little bit or made a little bit finer, that's still appealing, right? And then for the older birds, of course, they want the bigger piece. What you need to know about all poultry is they're greedy. They're greedy little buggers, right? So they always eat the biggest pieces first, or they'll eat the biggest piece that they can get down their throat first. Let's say it that way. Okay. So, so the more coarse it is, the happier the chick's going to be, or the adult's going to be, or the grow out's going to be. Okay. So try and, if you observe, spend some time with them and watch what size pieces they're eating first when you go feed. Okay. That'll give you some insight as to what size it needs to be.
I've got a little trick with my chicks, and I can do this because I have a variety of ages on starter feed. So I will take, my older chicks will pick out the bigger pieces, and then there's the stuff in the bottom that isn't as appealing as you say. And I put that in a container, and that goes for my new hatch chicks. So they get those little stuff at the bottom that the big ones didn't eat, and then I'm not wasting any food that way too.
Yep, that's perfect. Or you could pick on Frank and give him one more honeydew list, and you could have him ask him to make you a screen, right? So you can screen out the fines immediately. Put those in an airtight
that's a good
container.
idea.
Yeah. So if you had like an 1/8 inch wire mesh, hardware cloth, then you could pop the feed on there. Then those nicer pieces you can give to your grow outs, and the finer stuff, you can give to the chicks.
Good idea. Good idea.
Poor Frank.
Okay, well. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is another popular thing that people want to give their quail, and that's electrolytes.
Every time I see one of these, I cringe. It just drives me nuts. Sorry.
Is there any use for electrolytes? And if so, how would you tell us your opinion? But I guess we kind of got a little bit of that.
There is a use for electrolytes, so I'm not going to say that they're all they're bad completely. Here's the thing: if you go in, it's been a really hot day, something wasn't working. If you notice that the birds seem dehydrated or they're lethargic for some reason, right? Let's say the fans quit running in the quail house or whatever. If something has stressed them, then run it once through the water. One time. Okay. Not days, and I see people that just prophylactically put it in the water, like brand new chicks. Oh, I'm going to give them a boost, right? And then I do it once a week, or, I do it 3 times a week, right? It's like, no, don't do that. Okay. Read the labels. you see how much sodium's in there? Okay. And what people don't realize is the first ingredient is potassium chloride. Yes, they need potassium, but potassium chloride is another form of salt. Okay. It is in the salt family. Okay. So then you got sodium citrate, you got, of course, dextrose and maltodextrin are sugars. Then you got salt. Then you got another sodium bicarbonate. So this thing is just loaded with salt. Then you got sodium acetate, right? And then magnesium sulfate is Epsom salts. So, if I went through this and I could, magically just cross off everything that was a salt, I'd be a lot happier. But so excess salts, again, going to make the kidneys work harder than they need to. This is okay to run for a half a day or a day, okay, when you really need it. But don't do it just because. If you need extra vitamins or you need extra minerals or something like that, this is not the place to get them. Okay, this is not. I think you and I talked about this how many years ago? So, yeah.
Yeah, you'd want to dilute it to the proper amount too, right? Not just go, if this is good, a whole lot more is better, right?
Right. Don't even. If I was forced to use something like this instead of my homemade electrolyte mix, I would actually do that packet, which is a quarter ounce to 2 gallons of water. Okay. Just because I don't really need it this strong. Okay. They're giving you the recommendations when, the birds are huffing and panting and they got their wings up and they're very lethargic. And, this is like that last ditch effort to try and get them going again at this level. So just don't overdo it. I would challenge anybody who's listening, mix this up and taste it. Okay. Pour yourself a glass. You can even have ice. And if you can actually get it down and enjoy it, call me, because this stuff is horrible tasting, right? I don't even know. Sorry. I'm so anti-electrolytes.
Can you tell us about your mix?
My mix is too simple for people. They're not even going to believe this, but here you go. So per gallon of water, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon of molasses. You can use cooking molasses or feed grade molasses. I don't care. 1 teaspoon of grated ginger. So if you can get some fresh ginger root at the store, grate off roughly about a teaspoon, and one teaspoon of salt per gallon of water. Mix that all up, right? Let it sit overnight in the refrigerator and serve it the next day. You want to let it sit for roughly 8 to 12 hours. It'll actually get fizzy. Something about that combination and the ginger in there, it'll kind of almost self-carbonate itself, but it's really good. Now, try mine over ice and tell me how much you really enjoyed that. Okay. Huge difference.
Sounds a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay. And then one last thing talking about baby chicks is, can they have treats? A lot of people wonder if they can give their chicks treats. And if so, what can they have? How much can they have? Anything to avoid?
I would not do treats. I wouldn't do treats for the first week. Okay. Then after that, if you want to maybe let them play with some mealworms or some dried black soldier fly, I'm fine with that. If you feel like they're really heat stressed, one of the most interesting things I saw is a person would go get kind of the cull fruit at the grocery store that they were getting ready to throw out, and basically put that through the grinder or through the blender, blend it all up, and then put it into, reuse your yogurt cups, right? And then freeze it. And if it's like a really hot day, flip that over, dump it out, put it in a pan by itself, and let the chicks, after they're a week old or older, just let them peck at that, like a block, and cool off. And I thought that was awesome, right? But
that's a great idea.
One yogurt cup of minced fruit that's frozen is going to be enough for 50 quail chicks at a week old, 50 to 100 quail chicks at a week old, right? So don't get carried away. So no matter what age it is, you never want your treats to exceed 10% of their total daily feed intake. When you start going above 10%, you're diluting their overall nutrition intake for the day. Okay. So never more than 10%. So if you expect them to eat, a quarter of an ounce, right? So do the math, never more than 10%. So if you use the 10% rule, you'll be happy. The birds will be happy. Everybody will be happy and nothing goes wrong. And the other way to think about it is whatever they'll clean up in about an hour, right? So whatever treat you put in there, you want no residual left after 1 hour. And
Sounds like a
that's
good
after
plan.
that. Yeah. And that's after they've already been fed. So you went through and you fed them. Then if you want to come back and do a treat, whether it's a fruit popsicle for them or whatever, then one of the biggest mistakes I see is people mow the grass. They'll go out and mow their yard and they'll pick up those fresh grass clippings and they take them in and let the birds pick at those. Again, I'm not opposed to this, but only what they'll clean up within 1 hour. Because what people don't realize is the sugars in those grasses plus the moisture, it'll start decomposing pretty rapidly and it'll actually start growing mold, right? And it's also going to start off-gassing a lot of CO2. So you're depleting the oxygen content, in that brooder or wherever the birds are being at.
Oh, wow.
A little bit, it's hard to explain. It's like, I got my dog with me tonight, right? And I give her a little bit of beef jerky and that's a treat. Now she won't leave me alone. So now she's got to have it all. So, but anyway, a little bit, a treat is something that is a very small amount of the diet. Whenever you go above the 10% mark or what they'll clean up in an hour, now it's not just a treat. It's, we have to account for it. So if you want to do that, then you need to work with a nutritionist and say, okay, I want to feed mealworms every day to my chickens. Okay. So then we just build a feed around, your bad habit, and we'll do that. But we can do that, right? Hey, you laugh. I had to do a feed formula for a lady who wanted to use ground bear meat for her chickens in Alaska. Yeah,
Oh,
because
wow.
her husband worked for a guide service and nobody takes the bear meat home. So they had access to all this free bear meat, right? So she was going to grind it up, put it in her freezer, and take it out every day for her chickens. I ain't making this up. You can't make this up, right?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to do another show of crazy things you've heard, Jeff.
I don't know that we can fit that in an hour.
Okay. One thing that you did add when you sent me some stuff was a quail grower ration. And
Yeah.
when will we use grower? That's something that I don't know that we're super familiar with.
It's
Like at
3
what
weeks
age
start.
would you
It's
use
3
it?
weeks starter, 3 weeks grower, and then by then they're starting to push out eggs, and you switch them over to the layer. As soon as that group starts to lay eggs, then you move them over to layer. But it's 3 weeks, 3 weeks.
Okay.
That friend of yours that you connected me with, doing a large amount
Mhm.
of quail. I realized he was doing one feed all the way through, and I'm like, oh my god, no, this doesn't work. I mean, so a lot of his side effects, were coming from feeding too much protein for too long, right?
Which I think all of us are doing. We've always learned to keep them on. And honestly, there's a lot of people that believe that quail need that high protein level, and will keep them on starter feed for their whole life, and just give like oyster shell or something to supplement the calcium.
Yeah, I that and I just don't. I can't fathom that. I'm sorry. That just blows my mind. Right, and I mean, you can do it, and you're getting away with it, and it's okay. But does it make it right? I mean, I think people are, well, two, actually, if you switched them down to a 22, 23 protein, after the third week, you should be saving yourself a lot of money, because the difference in price between a 30 and a 23, again, I'm focusing not on the protein, I'm focusing on those amino acids. I kept the amino acids really high, I'm still at 1.29 and 0.47, but after they get past that third week, and this is going to depend on the quail too. So understand that if it's a 6 week to maturity quail, like it's going to start laying eggs at 6, the developmental stage you cut in half. So half is starter, half is grower. So let's say you have something that is a longer developing, maybe it's an 8 week or a 10 week quail, genetic line, then you're going to go 4 weeks and 4 weeks, right? Or 5 weeks and 5 weeks. So you want to make the break point based on when that first egg is laid, because that's signaling maturity, right? So halfway between chick and first egg is when we want to make a transition over.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, now we can talk a little bit about adult nutrition, unless there's something that you missed that we need to cover.
I don't know. I feel like I've been talking like way too much.
No, I love it. This has been great information. Okay, so next I want to go back to your younger years, and I want you to tell us about how feed is produced. So, want to know about like a pellet versus a crumble versus mash. How are those made, and is there a benefit of one over the other?
Okay, where do you want me to start? Okay, so here's the morphology of feed. Okay, no matter, so it starts out as a whole grain. We hope it starts out as a whole grain, right? Not a byproduct. Okay, it goes through a machine like a grinder mixer. We break it down. If you're going to turn it into a pellet next, then you grind it finer, and you're going to have a much smaller particle size. So it all gets ground, turned into a mash, right? Then it goes from mash to, if somebody wants pellet, then they have to add a byproduct to it in order for it to form a good pellet. So they're adding something like wheat middlings, grain dust, something like that, to get a good hard pellet. So then it goes through the pellet mill, and then to get a crumble, you take that pellet that you just made, right, and you put it through a cracker. It's kind of like two rolling pins that roll against each other, and it'll just gently kind of crack it so that you get those larger particle sizes. So that's the bare bones of how feed is made, right? Then it comes down to the ingredients and so on. I am a fan of coarse mash, where corn is basically cracked. Envision this. So if you take a good kernel of corn, not a cheap little, a nice kernel of corn, envision putting in that on a hard surface and hitting it once with a hammer. Okay. You hit it once with a hammer. When you pull your hammer up, what you're going to have is 5 to 6 pieces, right? Large pieces. And you're going to have a little pile of dust down at the bottom of the kernel, right? That's what you should have. That's actually the particle size that we want for poultry feed. That is ideal particle size, right? Now, for your quail chicks, if I can get a kernel of wheat cracked once, that is the ideal size. So, and if you can envision that, look, I'm a mash fan person, and that's just the way I was trained. Unless we're doing something very odd or unique, like when somebody wants like a soy-free diet, okay, where we take all the soy out of it. And the most recent craze is corn and soy-free. So we took the corn out, we took the soy out. Now, these are fun to make. These are fun formulas to make, and I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. Those, because of all the meals that we use, I prefer those to be pelleted. right? And because otherwise you end up with too much powder. You remember that you were talking about what your grow outs aren't eating because it's all powdery and fine, right? Corn-free, soy-free type diets end up being a lot of powder, and birds just don't have an appetite for that powder. So those I would pellet. But if I have a good corn, wheat, oat, soybean type diet, I would prefer them to be a mash. Let me go a step further and explain why.
All right.
So if I lay all those out in the feeder, I can, if one of them happened to be bad from the feed mill, let's say it had a little bit of mold or it had some, nutritional deficiency or something like that, the birds can detect it and they'll stop eating it. Okay. So now, just like us eating at a buffet, right? If something's bad, you can avoid it, right? You can continue eating, but you can avoid it. When you make a pellet or you make a crumble, you take away the bird's ability to sort. Okay. They cannot avoid, they have to avoid all or nothing, because now you've put it all into one bite-sized morsel.
That makes
Right.
sense.
So you have no choice. If you get a bad bag of feed, which you've gotten bad bags of feed, because I heard you say you had to take some back, but you get a bad bag of feed and you don't see it or you didn't detect it, you could end up with a lot of sick birds. You could end up with a lot of dead birds.
Okay.
I'd like for everybody who's listening or who watches this later to go out to Biomin, Biomin. Go out to the Biomin website. Biomin for the last 10 or 15 years has something like that, has been doing mycotoxin surveys of the grains around the world. So they're pulling samples, North America, Russia, Middle East, wherever, and they're sending to a lab and they're measuring them. This is all free information. So if you do the Biomin mycotoxin survey, you can see what we're seeing is somewhere between 60 and 70% or higher, depending on where you live, of our grain supply around the world has some level of mycotoxin. And a mycotoxin is what's left behind after a fungus or a mold has lived on that grain. Okay. So the fancy word for the PhDs who might be listening, it's a secondary metabolite. So the fungus lived, and when the fungus died or ran out or whatever, the chemical compound left behind is known as a mycotoxin. Okay. So it's a real thing. I mean, our feed supply in general as a world, because of greed and laziness, we want a higher yield and we don't want to have to work as hard for it. Our world feed supply is getting worse, right? It's just gradually getting more and more contaminated. So, then we put in things to offset that, right? So if we looked at the Purina tag again, there's probably something in there like propionic acid or other. It's a mold and toxin binder. So it's in there as a protective insurance. So it doesn't, these things don't affect your birds too much. Sorry, I'm going down horrible rabbit trails.
No,
Yeah.
I'm eating it up. I'm
Okay.
loving it.
I
So
warned you not to bring me on because I was just gonna, I told you
no,
I can talk about feed all day long.
yeah, and that's why I brought you on, is because I wanted
Okay.
to hear all this stuff, and I knew that it was good information for everyone to have. While we're on the subject, we're kind of skipping ahead, so I'll go back to the label and stuff. But while we're on the subject of biotoxins and stuff like that, can one of the big things that people talk about is wetting and fermenting feed. Can you talk about some of the potential dangers that can be associated with that?
You just really like pushing all my buttons, don't you? You love it.
I've known you for a while, Jeff. I know
Uh,
what buttons you
yeah.
have. Yep.
All right, look, if you wet feed, for a few hours prior to feeding it, the birds are going to eat it much more aggressively. Absolutely, hands down, because now you don't have any powder. It seems very uniform. It's great. Okay. After, and you're going to hear varying opinions on this, I would tell you anything after 6 or 8 hours. Think of it this way, right? Like potato salad in the sun at a family reunion. How long is it good for? Okay. Same thing applies here. So you add water to that feed, right? I would say you want to feed it within 4 or 5 hours. And you don't want to feed an excessive amount of it because you don't want it sitting in the feeders for a long period of time. So you only want to feed what they're going to clean up again in 1 to 2 hours. Give it an hour or so to soak in and get all mushy and feed it. But yeah, I see people, wanting to soak for 12 hours, soak for a day, soak for 2 days, soak for 3 days. And if you don't do this in the right environment, so the people that are doing it successfully are and doing what they think is a fermentation, they're doing it in a controlled environment, right? So they're doing it in a closed room somewhere where there's not a lot of airflow. And they start it to soaking. But you also cover that with cheesecloth because there's mold spores floating around in the air. And the last thing you want is the wrong mold spore or wrong fungus to land on that wet feed and start growing. And you can't see it with the naked eye. I mean, people think that their human senses are like their Wonder Woman or their Superman or whatever. Look, that mold growth can be so minute that they're never going to see it. And, then here's, so they try the fermentation. Sorry, I'm going to go down this other rabbit trail again, but they start the fermentation. Next thing you know, they see a little bit of runny manure or they see some off-colored manure. Oh my God, I've got coccidiosis. Then they start hammering them with Corid, right? for days. And now the bird is so messed up because you just stripped every good bacteria in its digestive tract out with the cord, right? You're actually giving the bad bacteria from the fermented feed a head start to kill your bird. Okay. You took away its entire immune system by getting stupid and killing it, trying to kill coccidiosis, which the bird didn't have anyway. And then you want to go back to fermented feed. And if you have the wrong bacteria growing in that feed, you're just going to kill. There's just so much danger there. I mean, it's just not.
I personally know of 3 different people that two that killed all of their chicks because if you think, like you said, sitting something out in the hot sun, now they're in a hot brooder. But I know of somebody that killed their entire flock of chickens with feed that they were trying to ferment.
Yep.
To me, it's the potential risk is a lot scarier than the potential benefits.
Yeah, I hear these horror stories, almost every month, right? And every time I see somebody talking about, fermented feed, and they don't truly know what fermented feed is. Okay, so 1 day is a soak, 2 days a soak, 3 day is tempering and the beginning of fermentation. True fermentation is out at day 6 and 7. Okay. If you want to soak feed or you want to sprout feed or you want to temper feed, I would much rather you do this with grains, cracked grains like I talked about earlier, like a coarse mash. Not do this with crumbles, not do this with pellets. This doesn't make any sense at all. So the grains and everything that have already been through the hammer mill, turned into dust to make a pellet, to make a crumble, are already so small. If you want to, like I said earlier, if you want to soak it for an hour or two just to soften it and make it more appealing, fine. You're going to get more moisture into the bird. I get it. But it's really a risk and it needs to be done. I would tell people to do this in their kitchen or a air conditioned environment, a closed room where, you can actually close the door, cover it with cheesecloth. But if you're just going to do it in the garage with the garage door open, not a great idea. The other thing is fermented feed really attracts rodents. They love the smell of fermented poultry feed. So you're just inviting mice and rats to come stay at your place, right? I mean, they can smell this for a long ways off. So, you got to clean it up. You got to keep it clean. I don't know. Sorry. It just doesn't, it's too much of a risk in my opinion. That's just how I feel about it. I get wetting feed, and we actually did here for trial. We used to do field trials. We did a field trial on wetted feed for chickens. So two groups in the same field, same hatch, same hatchery, the whole bit, and two groups. So this group, we soaked the feed, made it good and wet, soaked it overnight. So it was, good and wet the next day. The other group had dry feed, and these were Cornish cross broilers because we can see field trial data at 8 weeks. We saw no difference in feed consumption. We saw no difference in growth rate, and so all we had was, and the farmers who were doing it for me, here at Fertrell, all they had was extra labor. So if they calculated their labor at $15 an hour, they had less profitability on the group that they made wet feed for. And look, this is public information. If somebody wants to read it, I'll be happy to email them the PDF. I'll give them the farmer's name and number. And they're like, don't ever talk to me about making wet feed again, ever. Ever.
How to
So,
make an enemy of your farmer. Ask them to
yeah.
make wet and fermented feed.
Well, I mean, I paid them for the field trial, but they're still, they would never, they're not going to go back to wet feed ever, on their own, because there was no advantage and no benefit.
Okay. Well, moving on. When talking about and thank you, that was really great information on that. So moving on about you're mentioning a mash with some kind of coarser grains, and some people like to feed scratch or seeds or anything like that. I know with chickens we like to provide grit for them to be able to digest those. Would you be doing the same with quail?
Look, any bird, I don't care from the smallest bird, sparrow, to the biggest bird, they all require stones, grit, for proper processing of feed. It doesn't matter. Okay. So the analogy I use for a lot of people is like, do you ever wonder why the mourning doves are along the road in the morning when you drive to work? They're picking stones. Okay. The easy place to find grit is alongside the road. So every bird needs it. It's really cruel and inhumane to not offer grit to your birds, regardless of what kind of feed you're giving them. So for the folks who are doing this for their own meat, right? And when they process their quail, they really should go in and open the gizzard up. Every time I open a healthy gizzard, the contents is roughly 50% grit, 50% grain, and other, right? What the bird's trying to digest. So open up your gizzard and, do your own self-inspection. But that gizzard, and when a bird's being fed grit, the gizzard will be twice as big as a bird without, right? So you need that gizzard moving all the time. You want it contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. So think of it this way. The gizzard with that muscle action almost works like a secondary heart in the bird. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying it almost acts like a secondary heart function just keeping blood flowing throughout the bird. Okay. Just it's constantly moving, and you want it to be constantly moving. The other thing that I find is that gizzard is almost your core strength. So everybody knows that the health of any creature is in the gut, right? The immune system, the health, overall health is based on how good the digestive tract is working. Why are your birds any different? So I want that gizzard to be as big as it can be. And, you know, birds in captivity don't have that opportunity to go stand alongside the road and pick stones. So we got to give them to them. And, for
And
quail, it's just the small, 16th, 8th-inch size. They don't require anything really big.
that was what I was going to ask. A lot of people recommend using sand as grit for quail. Like they'll have a dust bath and they'll put sand in it, and they say that that's good enough. Is that good enough, or do they really need that chick grit?
Yeah, no, sand, sand isn't hard enough. Sand is only good for about the first 2 or 3 days as a chick. And then after that, they've already outgrown it and they need something a little bit larger. I would be using chick starter grit if it was me, something like a good 16th of an inch to an eighth of an inch. Your grit particle should be the same size as your feed particle. How's that? Right. So the feed particle that bird is picking up and eating, if we're paying attention and we're really good managers, that's the same size stone that bird wants for its gizzard. So the larger the grit is, and I prefer granite, but the larger the grit is, the longer it stays in the gizzard. Okay. So it'll function for you longer. If you think your birds are eating too much grit, that means the grit's too small and it's already falling out of the gizzard on the other side too soon. Right. So it's not staying in there very long.
And do they need grit if they're eating crumbles?
Yeah, every bird. I don't care what they're eating. And I mean, you can put them on a liquid diet, and they're still going to want grit. So, no, don't put them on a liquid diet. But yeah. It doesn't matter. Pellets, crumbles, whatever. They need grit. You also got to think of it this way, right? And I've started making this analogy: is that grit is the equivalent of our teeth. So they can't fully digest what you're giving them without that grit. Field trials that we've done, friends of mine, we see an 8 to 10% reduction in feed consumed over the same period of time. We also saw an increase in growth performance over that same time, birds with and without grit.
Wow. And for all the people that are looking to save money on quail feed, that would be an easy way to do it.
If you could drop 8% on your quail feed, and the chicks, are larger at 6 weeks or whenever you choose to harvest them, it's a win-win.
Awesome. And probably the chicks, the size in the store that's made for like chicks, would that be kind of the appropriate size for crumble? That'd be about the closest we could find. The next size up, like a chicken grit, would be too big, right?
Well, then you'd go to grower. So grower's about 3/16 of an inch, and that's probably what you could use for your adult quail. But everything for that first, 4 to 6 weeks, you're probably going to be staying with that chick grit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Hey, Terry.
grit doesn't have a shelf life, but you can keep it forever. So if you want to
There we
buy a
go.
lifetime supply, it never goes bad.
Terry, how are we doing on time? I see that it's 8:15.
No, let's go ahead and keep going. This is interesting. I don't care how late we go.
Okay, I'm loving every minute of this, so I just didn't know if we needed to wrap
I
things
thought
up.
Terry had other obligations. He said we had to quit by a certain time, right?
Well, that was just to keep us going till midnight.
Okay.
We're all right, Jeff. Keep going. I'll let you know.
All right.
Okay. All right. Well, so I've got your layer mix here. Do you want to tell us about that and why you chose those ingredients?
Well, I mean, I used the same ingredients that I used earlier. So, I kind of talked
Okay.
about it's corn, roasted soy, expeller meal, um, still using the wheat. All the ingredients are exactly the same. Don't, at this age, I no longer need like the turkey booster, for the extra nutrients. Once the bird is fully matured, you see the first egg pop out, we're good to go. Okay. Um, but uh, how many eggs do you want out of one of your adult quail hens? I mean, what's your expectation level? What should that be?
Mine
Huh?
are usually laying about an egg a day,
Okay.
pretty
I
close
mean,
to it.
does anybody keep them for any length of time? I mean, how long do you keep them in lay? It seems like the quail folk
Um,
tend to
it depends
recycle them
on,
very quickly. Go ahead.
yeah, for breeders who are breeding to sell like hatching eggs, we tend to turn over between like 10 months and a year,
Okay.
around 10 months of age. And then, for home use, if you just want some backyard eggs, they can go on laying for quite a bit longer.
They'll lay for more than a year.
Yeah,
Rebecca. Yeah.
a year to 2 years.
Okay. But I mean, not at the same rate. You're not getting an egg every day, right? For 2 years.
I'm sure it'll start tapering off later.
Okay. The reason I went with a 20% is you're going to get a slightly larger egg size, right? You should get more uniformity to it, to the egg laying. But you're telling me, of course you've bred yours to a point where, you've already bred yours to a point of excellence, so to speak. So you're getting a lot of eggs. You're getting a lot more eggs than I would have predicted. But this transferring into, so the extra protein is going to get transferred into the egg, as well as, the fat and the vitamin levels are going to give you better chick hatch. I mean, you're going to get better chick vigor when they come out of the shell. And so I'm trying to transfer as much nutrient to the egg that I can, for the hatch for the chick on the other side. And particularly in hotter climates, I would definitely want to be running closer to a 20%. And I also have the energy level down a little bit lower than most feeds. So your energy, so folks in here, the ME is metabolized energy, line 31. That's metabolized energy, and this is a calculation done for poultry. Most layer feeds are going to be up closer to 1,300. And all poultry, every one of them, eat for their energy need on a daily basis. That's the only thing that they know to eat for, is their energy requirements for that day. Okay. So energy is going to dictate how much they consume. Then everything else that goes in with the energy is going to control, how many eggs are laid, what's the size of the egg, still continuing with what the health of the bird is, etc. So being a game bird, I would be running at a 20%. And I've seen some people out there running 24% quail, quail layers. I don't think you need to be that high. I would want to be between 18 and 20, depending on where you live. Colder climate, I'd run an 18. Hotter climates, I would be running a 20, because I still need to get X number of grams of protein into the quail on a daily basis to produce an egg.
So for the people like myself that use a bagged feed,
Mhm.
which I know that making a feed is a whole lot better. But is there a way to take a commercial feed, and kind of boost it up a little bit. A lot of us are using like 17% chicken layer crumbles to our birds. Is that 1% difference, or even, potentially 2% going to a 16%? Is that detrimental, or is there a way that we can boost it a little bit to make it where it should be?
It's going to be so if you wanted dual purpose eggs, like for table eggs and for hatching, that would be tough. If you wanted to boost it, I would suggest adding fish meal to the layer feeds. If you were buying a commercial layer feed locally, I would probably look at using a fish meal, and that's because the amino acids of the fish meal are outstanding. You would definitely get better hatching eggs out of that, right? So if it was your breeder flock, not your table egg flock, I would probably use fish meal. If you get much above 3% of the total diet as fish meal, you're going to run a risk of having fishy flavored eggs. Okay, so you just need to know that. Now, if you like the flavor of fish, then go ahead, have more. But most people don't like to crack eggs in a skillet, for frying and get that smell of fish. So for the regular layers, that if you're just doing table eggs, and it's not that big a deal. But for the people that are setting aside birds for breeding purposes, I would have fish meal in there. And as you can see here, I have a little bit of fish meal in there, and I'm using that for essential amino acids and a different kind of protein besides just plant-based protein, right? But I lean to fish meal because it's coming from a cleaner source. It's not coming as a waste stream from conventional livestock operations, right? So it's not a Smithfield pig that got ground up and turned into meal. It's not, somebody's giant feedlot beef, leftovers and scraps that got turned into. So I just like it as a cleaner source, and I'm even fussy about what kind of fish meal, where it comes from. I've worked out over 10 years now. I've been working with a small family owned fishery out of Mexico, and they do a sustainable harvest. They're using the data collected by Peru to make sure that we're not overfishing sardine. This is a sardine fish meal. It's 100% fish. You get everything from the lips to the tail. I'm using a high-end antioxidant on it because the commonly used one, known as ethoxyquin, known carcinogenic, gives skin disorders to dogs and cats. Been linked to some health issues in horses. But anyway, see all that useless information I've collected in 27 years?
This is fantastic. I'm just making sure, and it's fortrell.com because I want to put it in the chat.
Yeah.
And and they can get fish meal from you.
They can.
Okay. So now that's in the chat there. Let's see. So this is a 17% chicken layer crumble. Does this look fairly decent, or okay?
No. It's horrible. I mean, just if we had a side by side comparison, I guess I should have had you send these to me, and I could have done like the lineup. The calcium doesn't need to be this high. Quail calcium levels are supposed to be 3%, 3 to 3.2. Calcium is the cheapest ingredient that goes into a chicken feed. So to run it at 4%, which is about where they're putting it, it helps hold costs down. Now, if you went back a slide, my fat level is over 7%, right? See, crude fat, 7%. Now, if you go forward, crude fat on theirs was 2.
Got it.
Okay. So just a huge amount of differences. the amino acid levels are significantly lower. They're, like almost 20% lower on amino acids. I can't see the methionine because my bubble's over top of it. I can see that it's 0.4 something, but it's
Yeah, it's 0.4.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, again, those amino acids are critical to, to poultry. First limiting amino acid is methionine, right? Second limiting is lysine. Third limiting is threonine, which they don't have to guarantee. So these are just, as you can also tell, I'm a numbers person. I work with them all day, every day, but they're important numbers to know. And so if people want any of the information I provided you, I'm happy to send it to them. They can also, pull it off of here. They can contact you. It's public information. I'm not, trying to help people have a better life, or their birds to have a better life. I don't really care if the people have a better life. I'm working for the chicken or the quail.
Okay. Let's see. And then one last question.
Okay.
Is there such thing as too much calcium supplementation? Like
Yeah.
people mixing oyster shell into the feed, or like crushing up eggshells and putting it into the feed? What can happen if they do too much of that?
Believe it or not, too much calcium or too much protein can give you a problem referred to as gout, and the bird will start limping and acting strange or walking funny. It also calcium when the bird doesn't actually need it. Like if she's not laying an egg right now, those calcium is going to build up in the kidneys, create kidney stones, things like that. They don't have the ability to pass all excess calcium. Right.
That makes sense.
Actually, you and I should talk, because I'd like to figure out a way to rotate males. So you're putting males in for only like a week at a time, let them mate, and then pull them out and put them like on the grower feed and give them a chance to flush all that excess calcium that they got while they were in with the hens. Because males don't have, if you're going to supplement with calcium, do large particle like the oyster shell.
Mm-hmm.
And because then the bird can get what they want and the males can eat around it. They don't have to eat the oyster shell. Okay. So
But if
another
you're
option.
providing if you're providing a feed that has the appropriate amount of calcium, you wouldn't need to supplement with additional calcium, right?
No, you wouldn't. And, like that feed you showed earlier has too much calcium, in my opinion. But, so I'm more worried about the males. So when I've been back to pellets and crumbles, they can't not eat the calcium. Do you follow me? So it's part of the whole mix. Whereas if I took that grower feed that, that I designed earlier, I could take that and I could throw in a handful of oyster shell. The hens could have all the oyster shell they want, but the males could eat around it. Okay. And they could only eat what they needed. I'm a little anti-pellet and crumble, as if you haven't noticed, but because one size fits all never fits all. And, I really don't need the males getting all that additional calcium. I think long term, of course, you're not keeping the birds that long, but if you were looking for longevity, I think long term it would give you issues, kidneys, renal system, things like that.
Okay.
So
That's
like
pretty much what I have on my list.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, like some of your other poultry that you're going to keep for 10 years, that's where it would make the difference in how effective that rooster is, out there year 8, 9, and 10, right? But, with your quail, year and a half, 2 years tops, right? And then you're cycling them through. So,
right. That makes total sense. Well, I know we had a whole bunch of questions. So Terry, do you want to open it up for questions, and we'll see what we have here?
Sure, we go ahead and do that. I did want to ask one thing real quick, Jeff. I like Rebecca said, we do have a lot of questions in there. Is there any chance that we could get you to come back and just do a full hour of questions?
Terry, I'll come back anytime you like.
That would be great, because I know we're not going to be able to get to every single question tonight, but I'm going to go through and pick out some of the better ones. And let's see here. Maybe I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way back up.
Terry, you should see the list of questions that I had potentially thrown at Jeff, and Jeff is like, "This is going to be like a 6-hour show."
Right?
Yeah.
No, but it's so interesting. I mean, I've got to rethink my whole feed operation now because,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I've been breaking a lot of rules.
Well, I work with a lot of different breeders, poultry and different realms of poultry, right? So, and first time we have this kind of a conversation, or show or whatever, it's like,
Right.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, Sundial Fragrances says, can I use an 18% chicken grower for laying quail, or is it too low in calcium?
It's too low in calcium. She can use it, they can use it, but just put the oyster shells with it. I wouldn't go any lower than an 18%.
Okay, I've had people ask me if regular chicken oyster shell is too big for quail. Is that going to present a problem?
I don't think so. By the time they're adult, it should be okay.
Okay. I bought a little hammer mill to grind it up a little bit, but let's see. Lindsay says the only issue will be fish meal is going to make some stinky poops. Is that true? Is that going to stink them up?
I don't know. Okay. If you don't go over the magic number of percentages, okay, so it's declining. When they're chicks, I had it up at 7.5%. When they're grow outs, I dropped it way down, right? Took it almost out. So, no, you're not really going to notice the difference. Actually, the bird's processing it, so you're not even going to detect the fishiness of it at all. What you would smell is if you're overfeeding protein, is you're going to smell too much ammonia, okay? And not to pick on anybody, but if the quail are properly ventilated, it should never be an issue. So if I walk into somebody's, room full of quail, and I smell, if I can smell the manure, it's one thing to smell the birds, right? They have their own odor. But if I'm smelling manure and what the manure is putting off or the poop is putting off, then I know that we have a ventilation issue. So I got bigger things to worry about than how the poop smells. So.
Okay. Jessica wants to know where she can find fish meal if there's none locally. And you said that was on your website?
We have fish meal, and look, if the folks that are listening, if they reach out to us, the other thing is we got a full dealer listing on our website, and a lot of them will have the fish meal. I'll try and point them into the, to the closest direction of where they can find it. It's not, look, it's not an Amazon thing, and it's not, necessarily find it on Google, but you'd be surprised. There's fish meal all over the country. You just have to ask the right person where to find it. And if she goes to her local feed mill, if it's not a Tractor Supply and actually a feed manufacturer, and says, hey, I'm interested in some fish meal, do you have access to it for me, right? Chances are they do. They may not use it, but chances are they have access to it.
Gotcha. Okay, Lawless Farm says, question, does rocky calcium count as grit?
It does not. So calcium is calcium. What we refer to as like rocky calcium would be we refer to it as a soluble grit, but it doesn't retain, it doesn't stay in the digestive tract long enough to do a full function, and the bird's not going to consume enough on a daily basis. So generally grit is granite or quartzite. It's a very, very hard stone, and it's designed to be that way so it stays in the digestive tract longer.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, because everybody's feeding a commercial feed. What are your thoughts on some of the better companies as far as trying to find a starter feed, a grower feed, and then a layer feed?
I mean, the Purina Startina is probably, really good. Kalmbach company, if you have access to Kalmbach, is coming
That's
on
what I was
really
going to
strong.
ask
As human beings and as a company, I don't like Kalmbach at all, but I'll tell you that they have a handful of feeds that I feel are well, put together. They're good recipes, and birds are performing very well on them. Some of the upper Cargill brands, like if you're getting the Nature-Wise type products, are working really well. And then again, people reach out to me, and that doesn't mean I want them all to send me an email tonight, but if people reach out to me, and the hardest thing is to get people to share their location, right? I don't know if they must think I'm going to send them spam mail. You're never going to receive an email from me if you didn't ask for it. So it's not going to happen. So if you tell me where you're at, and you can lie to me, just give me a general area, I don't care. But, I'll tell you if there's anything, I'll tell you what's closest to you that I feel is making a really good, quail feed, or where to get fish meal, or where to get grit, or whatever. Okay, so.
Okay. Okay, R&J Enterprises says, how often should you feed grit to your quail?
Always.
Okay, so just free feed it all the time.
24/7, yeah.
I think you already answered this, but is sand a good source of grit for quail?
Some of the really, really coarse sands, like for sandblasting sand, that's been screened and larger, it's okay for the first week or so for the quail, but they're going to outgrow it usually, by they're a week, 10 days old, and then you want to be moving up to like a regular granite chick starter grit, and then later on in life I would try probably some grower grit to see if they take it. Some of the larger varieties of quail, I think we're going to take the grower grit just fine.
Okay. Jessica says, I read a study looking for less expensive alternatives to the soybean for feed, and it was found that rapeseed meal was beneficial in several ways. What is your opinion on that option?
I wouldn't replace all the soybean with rapeseed. You want to be a little bit careful because rapeseed is actually part of the mustard family. So there are some chemical compounds that rape puts into the outer seed coating that protects it from being consumed too much by any bird or animal. You can replace, and again, depends on which rapeseed it is, but you can replace probably 30% of soybean, maybe 40% of the soybean with rapeseed without any negative side effects. Depends on how the rapeseed's processed, but you should be able to do that. Now, if she's referring to canola meal, which is part of the rapeseed family, then I can replace 60 to 80% of the soybean using canola meal. But sometimes the terms get mixed up. So there's rape and there's canola, but they're from the same family genus. So we just need to clarify which kind it is. And if she's looking at European data, they're probably referring to canola as rape over there, just because of, where it's just different terminologies going across, boundaries.
Gotcha. Okay, Carrie says, question, what about adding apple cider vinegar with the mother in it to the diet?
I like it in the water. It's wonderful. I would promote that all the time, 1 ounce per gallon. And under extreme stress, I would go to 2 ounces per gallon. Particularly heat stress is what I'm looking at. I'm a poop watcher, so I would also keep an eye on how the droppings look. And if I see irregularities in the droppings, I would adjust my apple cider vinegar accordingly.
So that apple cider vinegar all the time then?
Particularly when the temperatures are anything over 80 degrees. So.
That would be my shop. I want to remind you, Rebecca, don't forget to look for a winner for the hatching eggs and the $50 gift certificate. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Anita Garrett says, question. When pellets are made, will the friction and heat produced while compressing the feed lessen the nutritional value of the final feed than that of a mash?
Yes, it does. So
really?
Heat yep, absolutely. So heat, just like the food that we eat, we're going to lose a certain percentage of vitamins. Usually the B vitamins die off and probiotics, so the beneficial bacteria can't tolerate heat above. Some of them are down around 120 degrees, some are up at 150, a few make it to 180. So generally going through that die, any of the vitamins, any of the probiotics and some of the vitamins that are out near the outer edge of that pellet will definitely be lost. They say that the advantages of pelleting, because it homogenizes the carbohydrates, outweighs the loss of nutrients, but I have a hard time getting my head around that. So, but yes, nutrients are lost by the heat by forming a pellet. That is a true statement.
Okay. Adolf says, question, so you starter for the first 3 weeks. Yeah, can you go in, like you said, starter for the first 3 and then a grower and then a layer after that?
Right.
What's the percentage on the grower as far as calcium or not calcium, but protein, and what should we look for?
Depends on the quality of the ingredients. So I would say a 30 and a 24. If I was looking at commercial feeds, like you could go pick up, at the store, I'd be looking at a 30 starter and probably a 24 grower. If you can get in, on a custom feed somewhere, where all the ingredients and a good reputable manufacturer, I'm actually fine with a 26 starter and a 22 grower. But again, I'm hitting the amino acid levels. I'm not worried about the protein number. I'm worried about the amino acids. So, the poultry industry is shifting away from really looking at proteins altogether. Right now, they're just pushing amino acids, and they're not losing anything in performance.
Okay. This is a good question. Kat says, question, I've seen some people say that they've seen an increased aggression switching to a lower protein food. Do you feel this is a valid claim, or is it just more poor genetics?
Nope, it's a valid claim. So if they switch too soon, and again, if the methionine or the amino acid levels are not right, you will see pecking each other. You'll see aggression. The real telltale is if you see them actually pecking and eating the feather, right? Mm-hmm. That tells us that the amino acids are too low and the protein's too low. So it's about the quality of the protein. It's not about the number, okay? It's learning about the different qualities of protein that are being used, and how good are they.
Cool. Like I say, I got to rethink my whole feed program now. I thought I had it beat.
What's that, Rebecca?
I said, you've been trying to get me to mix feed for years, and someday when I have a little bit more time, I'm definitely going to do it. I know I've heard so many times you talk about the benefits of doing it, but just not quite there time-wise.
It's either that or, like I was telling you earlier, it's like just break down and work with a reputable company that you can dictate the formula, right? That you trust and you're getting what you asked for. Pay the extra to have it imported, and then I think you see your feed consumption go down by roughly 20%. So, and as
So that
well,
would
I
make
think
up
you'll
for.
see. I think you'll see the growth performance on the other side. So, uh,
Right.
you know, does it fully pay for the additional cost of the feed? I'm not going to say that that's going to happen, but I think it'll be night and day.
Okay,
But
Linda says
you're also,
question. Go ahead.
Rebecca, you're still adding supplement to your feeds, right? Or
I
no?
do.
You do,
I use the Fertrell Poultry Show and breeder supplement.
okay. So you're kind of, I'm not going to say cheating, but you're stepping it up a notch, and
Correct. Yep.
yeah. So you're not just using an off-the-shelf feed all
Nice.
by itself. Okay.
I'll be getting with you later on, Rebecca, to find out where I can get that.
Fertrell.
Okay. Linda says, question, I switched from a 17 to a 20% feed for my quail. Calcium is 1.25 max. I put out 6 dishes of oyster shell throughout my 40-foot aviary. It's been 2 weeks. Now I have weak eggshells. What can I do?
Yeah. Look, whenever people want to do the oyster shell add-on, I always want it in the feeder where they eat their feed. I don't really want it away from, we're counting on a level of intelligence that isn't in every bird to go find or seek out the calcium. So I would sooner it be in the bottom of the feeders, or you throw a few handfuls in on top of the feed when you're feeding them every day. When you see a fair amount of residual in the feeder, then you stop for a couple days, right? Until you don't see that residual, and then you go back to adding it right in the feeder. I'm learning over the years that that oyster shell or that calcium source has to be so close to the feed, you might as well just put it in the feeder, and I think you'll see a big difference there. The other thing, so people that are listening, I'm just going to throw this out, because of that question, but people that are fighting weak eggshells, get your water tested. I had to learn this the hard way a few years ago. Some of my large chicken egg producer customers, were struggling. So we got the water tested and found out that it was hard water. And that hardness of water actually reduces the absorption level of the minerals in the feed that you're feeding, including calcium. Okay, so if people are struggling with poor shell quality, I'd encourage you to get your water tested and see how hard it is.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica says, question, has it been researched or found that the deficiencies in feed can lead to more deformities in the quail's offspring?
I haven't seen any research. There's only a handful of deformities that I would link to as a nutritional deficiency. B vitamins for one, like if you're seeing curly toes type of thing. You can see a little bit of spraddle leg where it looks like the leg joint broke if there's not enough manganese being transferred by the hen. We see some issues with vitamin A, as far as eye formation, how well the oculars or the eyes are formed when the chick is hatched. Basically that's coming from your vitamin A family. Immune system and vigor, I can also see that with some B vitamins and some vitamin E, but nobody's researched it that I'm aware of. You can get a little bit if you go to a website called merckvetmanual.com, MERCK vetbpmanual.com. You can look at vitamin and mineral deficiencies in poultry. It's going to be very generic, but it's still going to apply to quail. And there's some really good tables and charts and information out there as far as what you're going to see as far as deficiencies go.
Okay.
And along those lines, what about Rhineck? That's a big thing that comes out frequently.
Yeah, thiamine deficiency. And I see Rhineck a lot with people that overuse and abuse Corid or Amprolium. The Amprolium blocks the uptake of thiamine. So, but yeah, Rhineck is thiamine deficiency. So it's one of the B vitamins, and it could be short in the hen. Depends on if it's Rhineck at hatch. Then you got to go back to what the hen's been eating and make some corrections there.
Okay, let me see here.
I am probably going to call it quits at 9 o'clock, Terry. Well,
that's where I was going to pull the plug then anyhow.
That's
what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to create a post over on the Facebook Coturnix Corner page, and we'll pin it to the top, and you guys can post your questions so we can go ahead on the next live, just run through a whole bunch of questions. Let's see. I don't know how to pronounce that first word. Aragonite is sold for use in marine aquariums. Would it be okay to add a sand bath for quail, or add it to a sand bath for quail? I'm assuming the quail would eat some of it.
Yeah, and all it is calcium, right? So it's seashell
okay.
calcium. It's basically like a coarse sand. It's very white. I don't know what the price of it is at the pet store. We sell it in 50-pound bags. We also sell it in truckloads, so you can get whatever quantity you want. I would do some price shopping and compare, because I would think at an aquarium store, you're probably going to pay 3 or 4 times as much per pound. But I don't know that. So,
okay.
But I would definitely check prices on that.
All right, we'll grab 2 more questions, and we're going to pull the plug for tonight. Andy wants to know if there was a supply chain shortage or shit hit the fan situation, what can we feed our birds?
Well, there was a supply chain issue when the whole thing in Ukraine started, because we counted very heavily on imports from there, and people were scrambling. I don't have a quick answer for him. And here's the thing is, because I don't know what we're going to have, and I don't know what we're going to be short on. So what I would tell you is, when the shit hits the fan is, when you see this thing coming, you need to call somebody like myself who's already been seeing it and say, okay, what's available out there? What can I do? Where should I go? Right. And, hopefully by then I've got an answer, and this is going to depend on where you live, right? Regionally. And I really don't, one of the reasons I stay away from commercial-based feeds is they get hit really hard by supply chain issues, because they do more imports than anybody else, right? So they're bringing in and they're shopping for least cost. They want to keep the feed price down, because they know when you go to Tractor Supply, if Cargill is $1 a bag less, you're probably going to buy it, right? So, but you need to have somebody in your hip pocket that you can send a message to, you can send an email to or whatever, and say, look, I'm starting to see these issues in my area. What is your area? That's and I'll tell you what I know, and we'll limp through it and we'll figure out, and we'll do something. But it's every supply chain is going to be different. Every year I see a new challenge in supply chain. Okay, every year. So it's not there's not a straightforward answer to that. I'm sorry. So it's, one time it's going to be corn, the next time it's going to be soy, the next time it's going to be wheat, it's going to be,
Okay. All right, and last question.
Here,
go ahead, Rebecca.
I just wanted to say, when Jeff says you can contact him, you really can contact him. Like, I've met Jeff through some other poultry contacts and stuff, and Jeff loves helping people. But like he said, make it quick.
Don't blow up my phone.
Yeah, don't blow up his phone. But he really does. He will answer your questions and is really awesome for doing that. So.
Okay.
I want to add to that. Okay.
Go ahead.
The only thing I want to add to what Rebecca just said is, look, honestly, we're here to help people, and don't send me paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. The more you write, the longer it takes me to respond. So just cut to the chase and ask the question, right? If I need more information, I'll email you back and say, what about this, and this, right? And people like to give me their life story. I grew up on a farm when I was a girl, and we had chickens. And Grandma had chickens, and right, and we never had.
Did you do that, Rebecca?
No, she didn't.
I'm not. Yeah, I plead the fifth.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right. Last question.
I get a lot of this, but go ahead.
GMO versus non-GMO.
Again, this is, it's like asking me what religion I am, and I'll tell you my personal preference. When I go anywhere shopping for food or feed, this is my list of priorities. I'll try to find organic first. I definitely go non-GMO second, and then if neither of those are available, then I go, then I don't. I just go with whatever I can get.
Whatever's
right?
available.
So,
okay.
But personal preference is, yes, I'm definitely a fan of non-GMO, and I'm actually a fan of organic. And I say that because I've actually gone to organic inspector training, and I've worked in the industry for over 20 years. Cool. And 80% of it is credible, and people are following the rules and doing it right. I will tell you that the large corporations who got into organics only to make a buck are probably not. That's just, again, that's my personal preference. I'm not telling anybody how they need to buy. But.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. Rebecca, do you got a couple winners for us?
I do. For the Hatching Time gift certificate, Jessica, you had a lot of really great questions.
Okay.
And for the eggs, Samantha Stratton.
Cool. All right, both you guys, Jessica and Samantha, if you would email me your shipping information to terry@coturnixcorner.com, and I'll make sure that they get to the right people. Jessica, make sure that I get a good email address, because that's how Hatching Time's going to send you the gift certificate. And Samantha, don't forget a good phone number in case Rebecca needs to get a hold of you for anything. So I think that worked out about perfect, 8:58. So Jeff, I want to say thank you very, very much for coming on. This was a lot more educational than I thought it was going to be. But it's kind of depressing, too, because now I got to rethink my whole feed system out there. But no, I'm very happy you came on. I appreciate it so much.
Look, I don't want anybody walking away feeling like, I don't want anybody depressed about their feeding system. Here's the thing. I want everybody to know that there's hope and there's a way to improve it, okay? You know what? You can't hold against yourself what you didn't know before tonight, right? Now, what you do with the information moving forward, that you're responsible for.
Yep, I agree. And Rebecca, thank you so much for setting this up. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the reins on this one and running the show. Worked out very well. So guys, we're going to go ahead and pull the plug on it tonight. Like I said, check the Coturnix Corner Facebook group. I'm going to start a post over there where you can ask questions for Jeff, and then we'll go ahead and set up another live stream where he can come on and just answer questions. So thanks, guys, for joining us. Don't forget to join us Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern for the morning musings. I'll try to make it this time. And yeah, have a great week. So everybody, we'll see you. Thanks for joining us. Jeff, Rebecca, thank you again. Can't say thanks enough. Have a good night, everybody.